it'll run for a while. The things will take a long time. So here's basically the flow of the data in this particular one. You are going to have the restartable spider that talks to the API, mbox.drchuck.net, which has a scalable copy of all this information. And again, it's going to do kind of a raw database, not a very clean database. It's sort of a mess. It's just enough columns to keep track of whether or not we've got this page or not. And so this has, the ones we've retrieved so far. And so what Gmane does is it sort of scans down to see where to retrieve next, gets that, and then starts scanning and then adding things here. So it just adds it, and then it blows up, and then it comes in again and says, okay, I'll start here, and then it starts retrieving stuff and fills this in, fills this in, fills this in. And sometimes you put like a delay in this so you don't overwhelm networks or don't overwhelm servers. But basically this is pretty much a raw retrieval of the email messages. And this file can get rather large. This is the one that's greater than a gigabyte. Now this data is actually really nasty. It's email data. The date format's changed. This is data that lasted from 2004 to like 2012 or 13. And so this data is got a lot of things wrong with it. It even has things where people's email addresses changed, and so it has this mapping file. This comes along with it, this mapping file that says, here's this one person, and here are the 6 email addresses that they used throughout the life of the project. And so there is a relatively complex, and so this part here is super slow, very slow. This part here is slow, but it'll take like, depending on how fast your computer is, somewhere between 2 minutes and 10 minutes. This first part will take days, perhaps, depending on the speed of your network connection. And so what Gmodel does is it reads through this. It actually recreates, it wipes this out and recreates index.sqlite every time it runs, so that you can change any number of things, you can respider things, you can do whatever. And often the cleanup, this is one of those cleanup processes, and you have to tweak the cleanup process. You like look at your data like, oh, the cleanup missed something, so I got to run it again. So this produces index.sqlite every time it runs. So this is like 2 to 10 minutes. Gmodel is 2 to 10 minutes. And it like maps names, and when it's all said and done, this is a very small, highly normalized, it's a nice data model. This one here had the Content SQLite has an ugly data model. Index.SQLite has a pretty data model. It's got foreign keys, it's got all this stuff, and all those things we talked about in the database where it's efficient. And so in your mind, keep track of how fast it is to scan all the data in a database with a bad model, and then watch when you run like GBasic, which is a scanner, or Gline, which produces line data, or GWord, and watch how fast they run. They run in like a couple of seconds at the most, and this runs in 2 to 10 minutes. And the difference is that's because the data is efficiently modeled in index.SQLite. So you can take a look at that using SQLite browser and take a look at the data model, and you'll see it looks just like the stuff we talked about in the database chapter. It's got foreign keys and all those things. And so that runs, and you got this, and then we do our visualizations and our analysis from this clean version of all the data. And so GBasic just loops through and prints some stuff out. It's a great way to test things. It's a pretty easy to understand program, and you could take a look at it. Gline does some bucketing and makes some histograms to produce a line graph. And then GWord does a different histogram. It does a histogram of word frequency and then produces that as the word frequency ends up in gword.js. And then we have 2 HTML files that use the d3.js visualization to produce a line and a word chart. And so, in another video I will show you how this code works, which is probably more useful than this picture. But this is a whole bunch of good stuff in this particular application, and if you really understand everything in here, you can build a pretty sophisticated data retrieval and analysis pipeline. And so that's it. I thank you for watching all these lectures, and look forward to seeing you on the net. We're doing some code walkthroughs. If you want to get the source code, you can take a look at the sample code and download it and work through it. And so what we're working on now is doing some retrieval and visualization of email data. It's kind of ironic. We're going to now look at the email data that we look at the email data that we started with. It's the same Sakai developer list email data. And so there's this service called Gmane. And Gmane archives developer lists and various email lists. And I've made a copy of their data because all the students in my class hitting their server with their API would crush it. So in order to be a nice guy, I put up a much more powerful server with just the data from this one list. And it's about a gigabyte of data, so be real careful if you're paying for network. So the basic process we're going to go through is we're going to have a spidering process that's a simple, restartable, focused on the network problems, data pulling to pull content.sqlite, and there's going to be a database there. And then we're going to have a cleanup process. This database is going to get large, about a gigabyte. And then we're going to have a process that kind of grinds through this data. It takes a while. And so then it's going to read this mapping, and I'll show you that when it comes, because things like people's names have changed over all these years. And it does a cleanup and makes a really nice, highly relational version of this data. And then we visualize from here. And so this could take you several days to finish this. This will take like a few minutes to run, and then this will just take seconds to run. And so this is a multi-step process where if you were doing something like running something for 2 days to produce a visualization and it blew up 3/4 of the way through, it would do you no good. And so that's why we break this into simple parts. But right now we're just going to focus on this part right here and take a look at the mail bit. The mail bit and retrieve the mail, and then we'll have another video to talk about the rest of this stuff. Okay, so let's take a look at the code. So here is gmane.py. That is the basic code, and it's hopefully this stuff is starting to look familiar. The thing that's weird here is we've got to do some date time parsing. And there is code that's out there, but you may have to install it. And I had to write my code in a way that didn't assume that you could install the date-time parser. And so it has, even if that's not there, it uses my own date-time parser, and that's what this code is. Don't worry too much about that. And of course, we have to deal with the lack of certificates inside of Python. And so we start things out. And this is really a simple table. We've got a messages table that's got a primary key, the email itself, when it was sent, what the subject, and the headers and the body. Okay? And so what we're going to do is, because we have to pick up where we left off, we're going to select the largest primary key from the messages table and retrieve that. And then we're going to go to the one after that, okay? And so we know what the ID is, and we're going to pick up where we left off. And so we have a starting point, and it starts either 0 or 1, and we're going to ask how many messages to retrieve. We've got some counters, and so we're going to say, okay, see if select ID for messages where ID equals whatever that starting is. That's the highest number we've seen so far. And if row is not none, that means we've already retrieved this particular email message. Otherwise, we're going to keep on going, and we're in good shape. And this is one that we want to retrieve, and we're subtracting that so we don't. And so this is the base URL. This is the URL of our API, the one that I copy. I have a nice copy of all this data on a server that's accessible worldwide and won't crash. So the format of this is, you can say I would like the email address for from 1 to 2, or from 100, from 102, 101, message 101 to 102, and we can just kind of walk through these things. So that's the message ID. And so if we're going to make the URL, we're going to take the base URL, add the starting address, and then add +1. So we got the slash at the end of the starting address, and so that's how we form those. And we're going to retrieve that, and we're going to decode it. And we've seen this in some other ones. We're going to check to see if we got legit data. If not, if I got a 404 not found or something else,